So, the web. That's why we're all here, right? We want to build things on the web. The web is made up of these three key ingredients. Web pages, every web page is built on these three kind of core things. They're the three languages of the browser, right? So you have HTML, which kind of, I like to describe this like building a car or a house or something like that. Like HTML is like the frame. It's the framework of the whole thing. You know, it's the shape of it, and the kind of just the structure of the car, if you will. CSS is cascading style sheets. This is like, what color is the car? Like, what kind of rims do I have on it? You know, like what kind of decals? You know, all the just the bells and whistles. And then JavaScript is like the logic and interactive dynamic aspect of the car. It's the engine. It makes it go. It's the computer inside of it. It's what turns the radio on, what turns on the windshield wipers. Anything that the car does is powered by JavaScript, right? Tonight we're going to focus on the first two, just the building and kind of styling of the page. In the part 2 and part 3 of our Intro to JavaScript series, we go more into fully on the JavaScript side. So tonight, HTML and CSS. The next two classes will be fully JavaScript. Some of you I know were at part 3 last week, and I've seen a few of you at other ones here and there. But it's always online. If you want to, you can always come back to the same class. If you want to kind of see it again, if you want to, make sure you come to different ones, it's always listed on our site which class we're doing as well. So let's just kind of start with, basically what happens. Like what happens when I load up google.com on my computer? Anybody? Who's got an idea? Just how does like that web page like appear in the browser? What's that? Exactly. You're going to make a request to the server. And you know what? Before I dive into this, I forgot the most important part. Introductions. Awesome. Let's jump back into it. So yes. Uzman. What's telling us? Basically, we're going to have to make a request, right? So you have your browser in your computer. So the browser is basically, the program that you're loading up. Depending on what computer you use, it could be Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer, if anyone still uses that. Opera, I think, is listed up there. I've never even seen that, but I've heard of it plenty of times, right? And Safari, if you're on a Mac. And basically, whenever you type that, google.com or Gmail, whatever it is, whatever site you type into there, right? It's going to send a request. There we go. Request to the server, right? So what is a server? Anybody?
I think it's like stored in a bunch of buildings somewhere underground and it just holds all the data.
Most of the time, yes, that is right. Basically, a server is just another computer, right? It's just like a big computer that is literally just serving files. Think of it like in a restaurant, right? If you want to order something from the kitchen, you ask your server. So you're like, server, bring me this. And the server goes and gets it and comes back. It's the same exact thing when you're looking at, as far as like code and the computers go, right? So it transfers over this HTTP protocol. Anybody know what that means without looking up there? Curtis?
That's hypertext.
Hypertext transfer protocol, exactly. So basically, this is the protocol that we send this message over, right? So we're like, hey, server, I want this website, right? Now the server is running on some kind of like back-end framework. Typically, if it's in JavaScript, it's going to be Node, but you also have back-end frameworks in Python are very similar, very regular. You have Ruby, Java, all different kinds of kind of like lower-level languages as well that backends can be built on. They're not things that we use to display stuff like we do on the front end. The front end, as I said, in the browser is just HTML, CSS, JavaScript. 3 basics. The back end can be lots of different things depending on how you build that out. But the browser will only ever run those 3 languages. Okay? So you have a request to the server, and then the server will respond with a response, basically sending back the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript that you need to load that file, right? So all those files are sitting on the server. There's like a specific server file that's like running, and it's just waiting, listening for that request to come in. And as soon as it gets it, it instantly grabs that data that it needs, and it sends it back. And as soon as it sends it back, it shows up in your browser window. And it's fast, you know? Like you open up, like type in google.com, but then, you know, a split second, Google is there, right? This is, this is a very fast thing. It's not like asking your waiter for, you know, a glass of water 7 times before it actually comes. Ideally, instantly, you're going to get a response back from the server, right? So, as we said, HTML stands for Hypertext Transfer, or Hypertext Markup Language, which is why the Hypertext Transfer Protocol is what we use to send these requests back and forth. So, a markup language basically just tells the browser how to structure things, right? It's like the building blocks of our web pages. We use HTML to display the content on our web page, such as text, images, and whatnot. And we use that HTML to basically just kind of like tell it where to put things. You know, we just kind of structure it into little blocks. And we're like, okay, right here I want this. Right here I want this. We're going to go into more detail on how we do that. But that's just the general kind of structure of a website. A computer doesn't know how to do anything unless you tell it. So using HTML, we tell it exactly where we want things to be on the page. We tell it exactly what items we want on the page, right? If we don't put it in the HTML, the computer doesn't know to put it on the screen. So here we have kind of like the anatomy of an HTML element. So this is what HTML looks like if you open up, if you ever go like on a website and you like view source, you can see like all of this stuff like pops up and you're like, what is all this? What does it mean? So an HTML element is made up of 3 pieces, right? You have an opening tag, the content, and you have a closing tag. All that together is an HTML element, right? So here, we're using an H1. Anybody have an idea what an H1 is? It's a heading, yes, header or heading tag. And as you'll see as we go through H1, you can have H1, H2, H3, H4, I think all the way up to H6. They're just built-in tags in JavaScript that basically are preset with like sizes. So H1 is going to be like the biggest size, right? So think about it like a newspaper, right? So the main, like the New York Times up at the top is the biggest text, right? That's your H1. And like right below it might have like a little subtime, like all the news that's fit to print or whatever. Might be your H2. And then you go down into the actual page and you'll have headlines. And maybe, you know, your headline is one size, and then as you go lower, your regular text might not be considered a heading. It's just going to be like regular text, right? But the way we say like the size of something, or you know, we break it down, is by building these individual blocks of code, HTML elements, right? And by piecing all these things together on the page, we display and create the entire page, right? So the anatomy of an HTML document. So a document is basically built up, as I said, of a whole bunch of HTML tags, right? So this first tag up here at the top, doc type HTML. Is it time? What do you think that means? Just take a guess. You've probably never seen it before, but just looking at it, what do you think that means? Exactly. See, you're a pro already. The beauty of HTML and JavaScript especially, is they're very semantic languages. If you're not sure what something means, there's a pretty good chance it means whatever you think it might mean, right? So here we have doc type, HTML. So we're basically just telling the browser, hey, I'm about to give you some HTML. Chris?
Is HTML case sensitive? Yeah, doc type in lowercase, would that make a difference?
That's a good question. I've never seen it in lowercase, but that's a good question. I do not know the answer to that. It's just kind of one of those things I've always like just put in there. I do. Let's loop around to that, and while you guys are doing your pair programming later, I'll look into that and get a solid answer for you on that. Yes.
Is there a link for the slides?
If you log into the video feed on our website, we'll probably have them. Just make sure you put your mute on, otherwise it'll probably feedback. Otherwise, I don't have a link to the slides, unfortunately. But we can like shift a little bit if you want. There's another chair over here. It'll help you see better. Okay. Okay. So as I said, everything has an opening tag, a closing tag, and then content in the middle, right? So the second line of code, remind me the name. Rubisha. What is the second line of code then? After the doc type.
Oh, it's HTML tag.
Okay. And is it what type of tag is that? So we have an opening tag, right? Okay. So where we close that tag? At the end. So basically, everything in the middle is our HTML, right? And so we told the computer, the browser, that we're going to give it HTML, right? And then all of the HTML that we're going to serve, we put inside of this HTML tag. And now we have one big HTML component, or element, and all of our HTML is going to go inside of there. And as you'll see, we're going to go through, and we will compartmentalize this and go deeper and deeper into this tag as we go through with structure. So now we have our head is our next tag. So this basically, as it says, it acts as like contains all the meta information. So like when you go to a website, right? And then like the title of the page like pops up at the top. Where do you think that comes from? Exactly, right here. Title. Oddly enough, is the title of the page. And the browser knows to put that at the top of your your little tab if you have it, or if you only have one, it'll be across the whole screen. If you want to have like the icon, for your page. Most pages have like a little icon on your tab. You would put that into your header, or into your head tag, not header. It's the head tag. So you got to think of it like this is just all like your head.
Actually, that little icon comes from isn't it the server, the web.xml, there's an image?
What's that?
Doesn't that come from the server? Like it's more of a meta information?
It is meta, but you store your meta information inside of your head tag in the HTML. So that's where you would link to that file, wherever it is in your server. This is where you would tell it to get that file from, right? Yes?
What's meta information?
What is meta? Who knows how to describe what meta means?
So really, it's about meta information is about this is all information to a computer, right? Anything that you say is metadata or meta anything, it's basically allowing you to. It's basically giving computers an instruction on how to. I don't want to say project a schema because that will be even worse. But to think of just the structure, how to read it. How do I read something? Let's say you have a book and somebody says only read the even pages and you'll get a message. And somebody says read even and odd pages and you'll get a different message. So when you give computers some information, you also sometimes have to tell them how to make sense of the bits and bytes. And that information is metadata in layman's terms.
So we'll also, this is where we'll basically, when we get to CSS and stuff later, like inside of our head tag, this is where we're going to tell it like where to go get that CSS from, where to go get the JavaScript from. If we have any other kind of scripts or whatnot, this is where we're going to tell it like to go get information. It's kind of like, if you need something, go get it from here, right? If you need the title to put at the top, it's here in this metadata. So this is not stuff that's like displayed in the page. When we get to that, we'll get to that next. But this is just all kind of like, just kind of stored information to kind of like tell you where to go get it. You know, just kind of like do like your memory, if you will, in your head.
It's like information about the information.
Yes, yes. Did you have a question, or were you just
No,
going?
I was just gonna say, it's metadata is the data that you gave.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so next element that we have on the page. McKinley, is it? What's our next element?
The body.
The body. What do you think the body is? What do you think a body tag tells us?
I don't know, it's all the content that I know that's not clear. So you have the heading and then it's the actual.
Yeah, it's like it's what we're going to display on the screen, right? It's like the body of the page. So the head is where we store all of like the memory and kind of like that information, right? But then the body is actually what you see, right? So all of the stuff that's going to come inside of these body tags is what we're displaying on the page. Now we're at the point where every tag that we put inside of this body tag is going to display something on the screen, right? So we start HTML on the outside, then we have our head for our metadata, and now we have our body. Now we're going to get into how to actually put stuff in that body to display. So here, we go back to our H1. So if this is the whole HTML file that we have, what are we going to see on the screen? Remind me the name one more time. Ian.
So as of right now, on the screen, you'll see welcome to Codesmith where the tab starts in the browser. And then for the actual content, you'll see JS easy parts, HTML and CSS.
Exactly. So the welcome to Codesmith you won't actually see like in the browser window. It'll be like the title of like your tab or your browser window, right? But inside the actual window, the only thing we're going to see is that JS easy parts, HTML and CSS. What do we think? What's that going to look like? Is that just going to be like little small text?
No, it's going to be like a heading.
It's going to be the header, H1, right? So it's going to be the largest text that we have on the page. Unless we tell it to do something different. But by default, an H1 is going to be the largest text that we have on our page. It is our number one heading. So I guess this just goes more detail into the body tag, which we pretty much went over in the body element. So this is where we can put anything. So here, this just paints hello world. So like we said before, in the previous page, we had JS easy parts, HTML and CSS. This is basically the same exact code, but here we just say hello world. And here in our browser, that's the only thing we see, right? Hello world. So if we want to add, images, text, anything, where do we put that? Svetlana?
Under the header.
Under the header. Or inside of
The body.
the body, exactly. So heading tags, this was just, I guess I got way ahead of myself here when I started talking about this stuff. Here you can kind of see like the lineage as this works. So here we have hello world 3 times, right? H1, H2, and H3. So we haven't told the page, we haven't given it any CSS or told it any sizes or anything like that, right? But H1, H2, H3, like I said, up to H6 are designated like tags within HTML. So you can go in when you get to the CSS and change the size of each of these things, but by default they're going to be largest to smallest. And the idea is you don't have to use all 6, but if you're using H1, if you're only using like 2 different headers, you would use H1 and H2, and you would just change the size to be whatever you want. You would really only go down all the way to H6 if you had 6 different sizes of headings that you wanted to use, right? So you always start at H1 is your largest text, and then you just kind of set it to work down for as many as you're going to use. Regular text, we don't put it inside of a heading because it's not a heading, right? It's just text. Any questions on that? Yes.
Use all the kids. Like there's nothing. What kid? What is the function of kid?
Well, right here, we don't have any metadata that we're passing through. So if we wanted to put a title in there, we would put a title. But right now, if we have this web page, right, the tab, it would just be empty. It wouldn't say anything, right? It wouldn't say like Google or JavaScript, Codesmith, anything. If we put a title in there, it'll give you a label at the top of the browser window or on your tab if you have multiple tabs open. But you don't have to have it, right? It's just information that's there if you decide to put it there. Cool? Yes?
You always have to tell them that it's a doc type. Can it just identify itself that it's like text?
It is just best practice to put that in there.
But you don't have to put it.
No, that's just a one tag, just at the very beginning, just so the browser knows this is HTML. Just be ready. Yes?
The forward slash, again, that closes the header. That's well, this is an indicator that it closes. Let's see how it-
Right here.
Yeah.
Yes, so basically this goes back to like the opening tag. So a tag gets open by a word inside of these like carets, right?
Yeah.
To close it, we do the exact same tag, but we just add a slash in front of it.
Right, and after the 3 headings, you have it closing the body. That kind of closes that section.
Yes.
Right.
So basically everything inside of this body is one big body element, right? Everything inside of the HTML is one big HTML element. And here, each H1 is closed here, the H2 is closed here, the H3 starts and closes on this one line, right? If you open a tag, you have to close it, or it's going to break, right? The only exception here is this doc type. Okay, so now we get into paragraph tags, another very common thing. So think about it like you're setting up like a Word document, right, or whatever WordPress kind of thing that you use to write documents for like a class, right? You're writing an essay. You go through like every time you hit enter, you go to a new line, right? So basically, you hit enter, you go to a new line, you start a new paragraph. So in HTML, you have paragraphs tags, right? So every time you put a new paragraph, it will start a new line. If you don't do that, like even if you just, like if you're going through and you just type in your like HTML screen the same way that you would like in a Word document where you just hit enter and you're like, well, on my screen it looks the same. Well, if you don't tell the computer to go to the next line, it's just going to put all of that text all together in one big line, right? It doesn't create white space until you tell it to. So it's not like your Word document where when you hit enter and create a new line, it creates a new line. No, here you have to specifically tell it like, this is one paragraph, this is another paragraph, here's a paragraph here, and likewise, right? Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You got numbers after the P like you did like the H.
No, so a P is just
Flat.
paragraph. Yeah, every paragraph is just a paragraph. If it needs to be like a heading, you wouldn't use a paragraph, you would use one of the header tags, right?
Can you use like 2 H1s? So
Yeah, you could have your whole page in H1s if you want to. You just
they're
look a
gonna be
little
the
funny.
same. Yeah, they're gonna be at that size.
Yeah, then everything inside of an H1 tag will be the size of an H1. Okay, now we get to lists. And this is another thing that you're probably familiar with in, working in like Word documents and whatnot like that, right? So you've got, when you want to create like little lists, right? You've got two different kinds, right? You've got the ones with the numbers and the ones with dots or check marks or whatever it is that you want. So in HTML, those tags are OL and UL. Grace, any idea what OL and UL stand for? Yes. So an ordered list and an unordered list. Exactly. 100%. Let's give her a round of applause there. Nice guess. See, it goes back to, if you're thinking about it, you're like, it probably means what you guess, So you have ordered lists, which are going to look like they're in an order, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Every item that you put in there is going to go to a new number underneath it. If you want the dots, you do an unordered list, UL, right? So inside of our ordered list element, right? So here we have OL, we start an ordered list. And then we put these two things in here, LI. Alicia, what do you think LI stands for? List. List item. Yes. So inside of your ordered list or your unordered list, you still use the same tag, list item, right? Because it is just a list item, right? You've already told it whether it's ordered or unordered. So beyond that, you're just putting a new list item in there, right? So a list item is going to be the same in either one. It just, if you put OL, it'll have a number in front of it. If you put UL, it'll have a little point or a dot in front of it. Just the same way you would if you, structure it in your Word document and you put the little the one with the dots and the one with the numbers. It's going to do the exact same thing. But this is how we have to tell it how to do this. Like when you do that in your Word document, there's some program running in the background in Word that tells it to display on the page this way. So when we do something in a browser, we have to tell it how to display it in the page, right? And we do that by using these, what do we call these? All these different blocks of code. Tags, yes, thank you. So, questions on lists?
It's a general question.
Yes?
Does it make a difference what kind of a text editor you use to building code?
Not at all. You could use Notepad on your computer. You could use a little note thing. It's easiest to build these things whenever you use a actual kind of program like VS Code or different. What are the other popular ones? Sublime is another big one. Sublime and VS Code and Atom, I think, are the three big ones. The beauty of using those is that when you put stuff in the screen, you see how this stuff becomes all kind of color-coded? It'll usually kind of tell you if you made a mistake, But at the end of the day, this is really just a text file. So you're just sending it to the computer, and here we're going to tell the computer, hey, this is an HTML file, so it knows what to do with it, right? If we, save it as a JavaScript file, it's still, really, you can just open it up in any text reader. There's just text. It's just, you tell it that this is a JavaScript file, and then it runs this code as its JavaScript, right? But no, you can create these files in any text editor you want. You just save yourself a lot of time if you do it in one that's made specifically for this. And if you get a VS Code or an Atom or a Sublime, they're literally made for any programming language. So any language you want to do, you tell it it's that type of file, and it knows the structure. It will color code. You can customize it to your heart's content for how you want it to make things look. You can set up rules. You're like, don't let me make this mistake, and it won't. Unlimited flexibility of things that you can kind of program into these programs. Yes.
If you're dealing with multi-level lists, do they come with numbers, or do you just open up another tab inside a list?
Basically, you would open up another list. Like your list item would be another ordered list or unordered list. And you could go as deeply nested as you want to go inside of there. Yeah. Thumbs on lists. Good. Okay. So here we get to anchors and images. So, a website really isn't much of a website if you can't put a picture in or link it to something else, right? So we have two of the tags that you will use repeatedly. The anchor tag, the A tag, is basically how we link some code. Like, see the page here, how it's like underlined in blue? I mean, you intuitively know now when you go to a website. You've been to enough websites, you know what's a link. You know what you can click on a page, right? So any of that stuff it's not just like the regular black text. Usually it's blue by default, unless the person writing the code uses CSS to change that color or change that style. But basically it's an anchor, and we use this href to tell it where to go. So you think of it, the anchor, it's like, if you drop an anchor off the side of a ship, it's got this link to get back up to the boat, so you know how to get to the boat. You just follow that chain all the way back up, right? It's the same kind of concept with an anchor tag. So basically anything that we put inside of that anchor tag, after we start the A, we put our href, which is our basically reference, to tell it where to go. And then we close our opening tag, and everything that's in between there before we put our closing tag is going to be that link, or that anchor, if you will, right? So I could put a whole paragraph in there if I want to, and the whole thing will be a link, right? If I just put one letter, and then I put the rest of the text after, only that one letter would be the link, not the whole word. So once again, the computer only knows to do what we tell it to do. So everything that you put inside of that anchor tag is going to be a link that goes to wherever you've set as your href, right?
And it has to be unique.
It has to be unique. Well, you can have 7 things on the same page linked to the same link.
No, but like, for example, I can create kids.com right now and create that link. Oh yeah, and then it's gonna just.
Yeah, so this is basically just telling it, go to cats.com. You could also, as we'll get into later, you'll see, I don't know if we get into it here, but maybe in the challenges, you'll see that you don't have to tell it to go to another page. You could tell it to go to another part of this page. Like sometimes it's like, click here to go back to the top, and you click that, and it pops you right back up to the top. Well, actually, you're going to do something like that in your pair programming challenge later. So you get a little practice and kind of see how that works. So your href, it doesn't have to go to another website. It can just maneuver you around the page that you're in. Or on your site, it can go, if you have like your navigation bar, right? Like when you click on each one of those things, it goes to another page, right? Those are all links. And the way that it knows where to go is this href. Reference, okay? So similarly, image tag down below, and this one is a unique tag because this one closes itself, right? See how at the end of the image tag, like right at the end, we put the slash and the close instead of having an opening tag and then a closing tag? Well, the reason is because the image is the thing itself, right? We're not trying to put any text in it or anything else in it. So it is just this one thing. So it allows us to close this automatically, but you still have to close it. So if you have this page here, but you don't put that in there, it's gonna leave an open tag, right? That slash at the end, you have to have it to close it out. So here, we don't use href, we use source, src. We're basically doing the same kind of concept, right? But in our anchor, the href is like the reference of like where you're gonna like go to. Where does this link go? For an image, it's more of a source. It's like, where are we gonna get this image from, right? So the link is where are we gonna go to. The source is, where am I gonna get this from, right? What's the source of this image? And this could be another website. This could be inside of your own website. It really just kind of comes down to how you refer to it inside of your source.
And it's always within quotes. So
Yes.
What if it's just a picture on your computer? Does it have to be on a website somehow?
So if it's a picture on your computer, well, if you want to put it on the internet and have other people be able to see it, you've got to put that picture somehow on the website. So you'd have to upload that somewhere on the internet. If you're working just on your computer, then basically you would tell the source would just be how do you get to that file in your computer. You know, like if you go to your file manager and you're like, open up all these things and it gives you that big long like string of like directories and slashes. You can do that same thing here, but when you upload that to the web, it's not going to work for someone else because they're not going to have that. So basically, most of the time when you're in development, these files are in your computer, but you structure them in like, basically, you know, file structure to where you can just say, okay, my HTML file is here, right? So all of my images are in my images folder, and then they're just there. So here, you could just say image source / images / whatever the name of your file is, right? And then ideally, when you upload that website to the web, you also upload that images folder and keep it in the same file structure so that when you're up there on the server, it also knows to go to the images folder to get it, because that images folder lives also on your server when you upload your files. Does this make sense? So, before I go on, what do I use to for an anchor tag? Tina. A. But then how do I? What's the little tag I put inside? href. And an image. Image source. Remind me your name again. What's that? It was mine. So, I'm terrible with names. I'll remember it next week when you come back, but I'll probably forget it all night tonight. Okay, so now we are moving on. Okay, good, they fixed this. Last time I did this, the colors were messed up. So now we're going to go on to another tag, a div tag. What does that sound like it is? A division, exactly. So what does that mean? It could really mean anything you want it to mean, really. You're just basically saying like, hey, this is like one set of code, and I just want to set like, this is one division. So, you know, you could have each paragraph inside of its own division if you want. The benefits of using these div tags is we'll get into here, and it goes more into when we get into CSS. You'll kind of see like what all this allows you to do, because it allows you to kind of compartmentalize code and do specific things to things within a certain div, right? So this is just saying like, hey, this is just one section of code, and it doesn't change the way it looks until you use CSS to change the way it looks, which we'll get to later. We have a very poor example here that you should never actually use in the real world, but we haven't gotten to CSS yet, so we're showing you how to do this in HTML. So you have the style parameter in your div tag, which you can use on anything, which allows you to put CSS into the tag. So basically, as we move to the CSS portion later, you'll see like background color blue is a CSS tag, right? That we're going to link to, right? And we'll talk about how we link that later. But for now, just know that the reason that we use these divs is so that we can do different stuff here, right? So as you go through this code here, right? This first div, say background color blue, and then we have this paragraph div 1. Right below that, we have another div with a background color red and div 2. And what this does is, so they're both div tags, right? They're both the same kind of tag, but now we've used styles to make them look different. And so here you can see the background color of this one div is blue, and the next one is red, right? And the only reason that we did that, we could have easily just had div 1 and div 2 as 2 paragraphs, but we wanted the first one to have a different background color than the second, so we put them inside of a division, just a section of code. But just like every other tag, except for the image tag, when we open it, we have to close it, right? Because when I say div style background color equals red, everything I put inside of that tag is going to have a background color of red, right? So you might not want that for your whole page, so you have to make sure you close your tags in the right places, right? Questions on that? Of that concept of like dividing your page up into divisions? Good. So basically, the stuff that we've talked about tonight allows you to create a very boring, ugly web page like this, right? We've got text on the page, we've got images, it says there's images, but there's no image on this page. We've got anchors, all these links, and we've got divs kind of broken down into different stuff here, right? But this is ugly. If you went to a website that looked like this, you'd probably just go to another website, right? Nobody wants to see that. So, I'll tell you what, before we move on, what's going on in this section right here? Remind me of your name.
David,
David. What is this?
you have your unordered list of events and the items.
With list items, exactly. What about, why is this text so much bigger than all the rest of the text on the page? Chris? It's most likely a header 1. It's the biggest text on the page, so chances are it's our H1, or heading 1, right?
Can I ask a question? So
Yes.
It's underlined, so it's a header 1 and it's a link.
You got to my next question. Said Lana. All of these pieces on here that are a different color and underlined are our anchors, right? They're our links. Now, what is it? Why are some of them purple and some of them blue?
Some are for
Ian, what was it?
Some of them have been
Exactly. So you have visited links and unvisited links, right? So the regular, as I said, by default is blue for a link. But by default, if you've clicked on that link and gone to that, and that's in your history of your browser, then that's going to be purple, right? It's a good just kind of indicator to be like, oh, I already clicked on that. I don't need to see that again, Now you can also use CSS to change that. Maybe you always want your link to be blue. Maybe you always want it to be hot pink, whether somebody's clicked on it or not. You can change all of these things. CSS, right? So
But the default is always purple.
the default is always blue and purple, and then the default is always black for just regular text, right? Unless you tell it otherwise. So okay, what about this? What about this section here that's kind of like indented over, and then there's this other section over here that is this. What do you think we're using to separate these different sections?
CSS.
Division, yes, who said that? Yes, division. So those are different div tags, right? So this is one div over here on the left, and this is another div over here. So as you can see, you imagine you put just like a border around this, right? So like all this text just happens to start here. This is one division, right? But on the left of that, we've got another division. And how they get like displayed and how much space they take up and where they go, that's all CSS. But for the, right now we're still just on HTML. Just know that this is how we divide pieces up and we make different parts of the page have different styles and look different.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
And the color of the link doesn't matter if it's a link referencing that page or an external page?
Doesn't matter. Same exact thing. A link is a link as far as the computer is concerned. Whether it goes to another part of your page whether it goes to another page, whether it goes to another file within your like website. Doesn't matter. It's all the same.